I'm from South Africa, University of Pretoria. We're a very large university. We have 40,000 students. I don't think I need to tell anybody about our history in South Africa. But one of the legacies of our history is that we still have many, many students who've been to very poor schools, particularly in terms of their maths and science instruction. And we can't just wait and say, okay, well, in 20 years' time, the education hopefully will have got better for everyone. We've got to have a way of accelerating student success, even at university level. And so we have an extended degree program. And before I talk about using the Skyscraper activity, I want to just tell you a little bit about the extended degree program. So, this way. Okay. Oops, sorry. I've been working in academic development for a very long time. In the early 90s, which was just before apartheid ended, I was running a science foundation program, and I found that there were 6 factors in particular that seemed to have a negative effect on students' performance. Background knowledge coming from schools where the teaching was poor, I mentioned, attitudes, behaviors, cognitive skills, practical skills, laboratory skills I'm referring to, and metacognitive skills. So in designing the extended degree program that I'm currently running, I went back to this work. The extended degree program that we're running now only started last year. This work was done in the early 90s, but these are still issues. Then we had another thing happen. In 2009, we had our first entrance to the university from a new high school curriculum and a new high school exam, which seemed to prepare students even less for university study than in the past. And so what happened was we had 1,100 first-year engineering students come in to my university in 2009. We had fairly high entrance requirements, 70% for maths and 60% for physical science. In the first semester, the students take 4 16-credit courses. A credit is 10 notional hours of study. And a whole lot of them failed in the middle of the year. So we sent a letter saying, if you failed 3 or more of your subjects, we strongly recommend you to move out of the engineering program for 6 months into a 4-year science program where you'll get more support. And 110 students did this transfer, and I sent them questionnaires to say, tell me about your experience in the first semester in engineering. What was difficult for you? And so here's a summary of their responses. The amount of work that they had to do, 92% said it was much more or more than they expected, almost all. And 60% said it was more than they could cope with. I separated out the questions of how was the experience relative to what you expected and what you could cope with. The speed, again, 82% it was too fast, faster than they expected, 75% faster than they could cope with. The level of difficulty, 80% said it was harder than they expected, 67% harder than they could cope with. Amount of support, 63% less than they expected, 72% less than they needed. And most of them said they organized their time poorly. So these factors and the factors I mentioned in the first slide were 2 sources of information that I used in designing the extended degree program. And so the extended degree program has 5 design principles. So the first one is to explicitly help students make the transition from school to university. Our lecturers like to say, these are adults. But I say, they are not adults. 2 months before they came to university, they were children. They didn't become adults over the summer. There's a big transition that needs to be made, and we need to help the students to make that. We also need to maintain high student workload, and I've defined workload as being the time that the students put in. But then we need to increase the volume of work. So I've tried to separate out the concept of volume of work and workload. Volume of work is how much new content is coming at the students. We need to decrease the support over time, and we need to begin with familiar subjects. So conceptually, this is what the model looks like. At the beginning, a lot of support and lower volume, and then as time goes on, the volume increases and the support decreases. And if I were to represent it visually, the pink represents support courses, and the green represents mainstream. So in year 1 there's a lot of support and not too many mainstream courses. In year 2 there's more mainstream, some support but less. In year 3 there's no support but fewer courses. And year 4 and 5 it's the full load of mainstream courses. So the students take 3 years to get up to speed with decreasing amounts of support. We have the developmental modules, 2 kinds, additional modules. These are not extra tutorials. They're courses with their own content and extra 4 periods a week. 1 lecture, 3 discussion classes. We take them in groups of 50 students. In the mainstream classes, they're in lecture groups of 500. I was listening to someone this morning talking about a large class of 250 and thinking if only we had that luxury. But we take the students in groups of 50. We focus on background knowledge, conceptual understanding and problem-solving skills. And then in terms of requiring the students to behave in the way that successful students behave, we require attendance. We give them weekly assignments which they get feedback on. We give them class tests and 2 semester tests. And these are developed in consultation with the mainstream lecturer. So this is not a completely separate program from the mainstream. There is some level of integration. And then we have another course called Professional Orientation, which is another 6 periods a week, focuses on skills, communication. We've heard this is a problem, particularly for engineers. IT skills, life skills like time management and stress management, study skills, technology, they do some Lego. And it's project-based. For example, there's a project on green building. And the team that teach it are multidisciplinary. They come from maths, and they come from educational psychology, and they come from academic literacy. This just gives you a comparison of what the course load looks like. So you can see the course load increases gradually over 3 years with less support. So now I want to talk about using the Skyscraper activity with this group of students. I think many of you have been to the Skyscraper workshop. I went to it for the first time last year. And the activity consists of building a structure as high as possible, within time, within budget. It's got to be earthquake-proof, it's got to be aesthetically pleasing, and it's only made out of extruded polystyrene and pencils. So that's the activity. We did it in the context of the additional physics module that accompanies the mainstream physics. We had 275 students divided into 6 classes. So we had quite large groups of 8 to 10 students. We were in normal classrooms, which posed some challenges, having to cart material around. And we did it over 3 periods of 50 minutes each per group. And then we marked the assignments based on the criteria of stability, height, budget, aesthetics, time and organization, and documentation. And these 2 guys are the co-authors of this paper. So they were both instructors in the course, and there you can see they're measuring the height of one of the students' construction. So then we did an analysis of how did the students do. And we found that there were problems with the budget and the documentation. Most of the groups got less than 3 out of 5 marks for the budget. I have to say this is a general problem in South Africa, very poor personal financial management skills. So I don't know if it's a spillover. And most of them scored quite poorly for documentation. They just didn't document properly. And those of you who've done the exercise know that that's an important component. Then we decided to do a secondary analysis because we wanted to see, well, what exactly were the students having problems with? So there were many, many factors. I won't go through all the details now, but I'm going to highlight for you some of the ones where the students had particular difficulties. So, not planning carefully. Only about 1/2 of the students actually produced a project plan that was reasonable. Less than 1/3 actually thought through the constraints, so they didn't do the conceive part properly at all. And only 1/2 actually managed their time well. And I wondered if this is partially a sign of the times. A lot of young people, let's just figure it out as we go. Try it. If it doesn't work, try something else, fiddle around, rather than plan properly from the beginning. Less than 1/3 of them calculated the center of mass. If you're going to design a structure, you have to have some idea of where the center of mass will be, particularly if it's going to be able to stay standing when it's tipped over. And this was surprising to us because we did it in the additional physics class. They had just done center of mass calculations. And I wondered if this isn't a problem of transfer. Those of you who've worked in cognitive science at all will know that students don't necessarily transfer what they learn in one context into another context. So maybe that was part of the problem. More than 3/4 made careless mistakes, again, not paying attention, and then less than a half actually did correct budget calculations and complete materials list. And again, I wonder whether part of the problem was they wanted to get on with the task, and the task for them was build the thing. Don't plan it, don't think about it, just build it. So there seemed to be a rush to do these other components quickly and get them out of the way. Lack of attention to the design and intention, understanding the importance of actually doing the design. So more than a third didn't actually produce a thorough design. More than a third deviated from their design when they went to build their skyscraper. And more than a half of the design structures didn't actually meet the requirements and they had to be altered on the fly. So, as I said, I think this is lack of attention and intention. Here's an example of this one. It didn't hold, so it had to be redesigned on the fly. So we decided after this that when we did it again, we needed to assign more roles. I should say that these are first-year students. They haven't done any engineering per se yet. They're just doing their basic science courses. We put this in to give them some exposure to an engineering type activity in their first year. But not only are they first-year students, but they're first-year students who are not adequately prepared for university. That's why they're on an extended degree. So we've got to put more structure in place. So we decided, we did it again this year, just before I came, we decided to put these additional roles in. So the Skyscraper activity already has project engineer, design leader, and implementation leader. We've added a few more roles: quality assurer, timekeeper, record keeper, and financial manager. And then we felt we needed to spell out what happens in each session to help them manage their time better. So we've actually, in the handout now, told them what they need to do in each of the 3 sessions. So the first session we explicitly say, no designs, do the conceive part, think it through. In the second one, we've told them exactly what they need to prepare. And then the third session is when they actually do their building. So we've tried to provide more scaffolding for them to be able to do the task. Well, the benefits for our students: the first-year students get to do an activity that feels like engineering, so it isn't all just physics, chemistry, mathematics. We gave them a questionnaire saying, to what extent do you agree that the Skyscraper activity increased your understanding of how engineers think and work? And 78% said yes, it did do that. And then later in the year, we do another CDIO type activity with Lego, where they actually have to design cranes. They have to read about gears, and they have to design a crane. And they have a competition to see whose crane can lift the heaviest weight. So we follow on from some of the CDIO ideas. Interestingly, we found that the heterogeneous groups worked best. The mixed race and mixed male-female groups worked the best. So here's just a photo of a few of the teams with their outcome. Thank you.
Good. Do we have some time for questions? Yeah.
No questions.
I have to say, I haven't done the Skyscraper activity here, but the head of our department made the mechanical faculty go through it. And they did worse than these teams.
Oh, really?
I mean,
budget.
I don't think this is just the first year problem.
I was just thinking, you have really large groups. What about free riders in the groups?
Yeah, we decided that those group sizes were too big, and so we reduced the group size this year. But then also because we allocated many more roles, now this year every student had a role.
Okay.
So that helps do away with freeloaders.
Other questions? I have one more question for you while the next paper is being set up. In your paper, and I read a bit of your paper before the session, you talked about difficulty with acquiring materials for the workshop. The polystyrene wasn't readily available, and my question would be, is there a way to perhaps adapt
locally,
to local materials, or to just slightly change your activity?
Yeah, I would like to try to find something. When we did the workshop last year in Montreal, I had never seen that blue stuff before.
Right.
And I didn't even know that there was a difference between extruded polystyrene and expanded polystyrene. And then once I found out the blue stuff was extruded polystyrene, it took a long time to find any in South Africa. So I would love to find a local alternative, but I don't know what it would be, because that extruded polystyrene has such nice properties. It's, you know, it's strong and it's light.
Yeah.
But it's something to explore.
Yeah, there's a guy making packing material now from mushrooms, I think,
Okay.
which would also be biodegradable, perhaps, and is light. And maybe we can get him to supply CDIO, so we don't fill garbage bins with that.
Polystyrene.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.